couple weeks of school, there was daily instruction on exactly what PBIS meant in our school, what exactly respectful, responsible, ready to learn meant in the school. It probably happened in every class. It was definitely, our students received agenda books, so it was in there with a chart of what the behaviors meant so people could refer to it at any time. And we would also do it throughout the year at times too. And always collect data to make effective decisions. Sure.
Data collected school-wide.
Well, for us, it was using the merits and how, for what purposes students received merits. And the students had to put their names on the merits so you could even see who was getting merits for what. But that was only if the students turned them in. Because I did have students who hoarded their merits and just had a huge stack of them and never spent them on anything. So it was a little hard to track data on that. You can also look at your suspension rate and your how often students are referred to the office. That could be other data that you use to collect school-wide. Trying to think if they used anything else. Yeah, I don't think so, because we had to do a lot of disaggregating of our data because our school had serious problems with referrals by different subgroups. So we had to also disaggregate our data and see. But you can also do that with the PBIS and see if the interventions actually make an impact on the types of students who are being referred to the office. So not just school-wide, but looking at different subgroups. For secondary prevention, these are your yellow zone students. Your interventions kind of get ramped up a little bit more. These are your students who are at risk of possibly becoming red zone students, but they're also at risk of remaining in the green zone. So that's really what we want to emphasize, is we want to push those students back into the green zone. They don't necessarily require an in-depth, highly individualized program. They maybe just need a little extra support. For an idea of what kind of students would be in the yellow zone, these would be your students who are maybe referred to the office 3 to 5 times a year. So these are not students who are in the office all the time. Some of the things that you can do, oops, there we go, okay. The key features of secondary prevention are that, again, it has to be consistent with what the school-wide expectations are. So whatever your school-wide expectations are, it should still be the same thing with the yellow zone students. Again, the faculty and the staff need to know who is getting the support and how they can support it so that they can be consistent in applying the strategies. You should do a functional assessment to see why the students are behaving the way they are. Maybe you need to have just a simple behavior contract. That might be enough to remind the students of how they're supposed to behave. Maybe they're having some problems with some social skills, so having a little social skills group might be enough to help them move into the green zone. Maybe they just need a little bit of counseling, connecting with an adult in the school. Sometimes even just a lunch bunch might be enough for a student to have that real solid connection, and then they can remain in the green zone. That's really our ideal, is we want our students to remain in the green zone. It's important to make sure that there's adequate resources to support students who are in the yellow zone or the strategies that you're implementing. So you may need to make sure you have a team who will work on these kinds of things. Maybe they have weekly meetings. Maybe they're running the groups. So there's a group of people or resources that you have that can do this. Also important, the student has to buy into it. Because if the student doesn't buy in, it's not really going to change their behavior. So it really needs to be framed in a way that's appealing to them and they want to be part of whatever the intervention is going to be. With contracts, often it's, they get some reward for following the behavior. So they might have a contract that says they'll do certain things in every period, and every period the teacher marks whether they did them or not, and if they have so many at the end of the day, maybe they get a reward of some sort. And that is really motivation enough for some students. For others, it's not so much. And again, continuously monitoring the students. So even though they don't need in-depth interventions, they still need some intervention and some support, and we need to make sure that what we're doing is working for them. And tertiary prevention. These are your red zone students. So these are students who are in the principal's office 6 or more times a year. Maybe 6 doesn't seem like it's a whole lot, but as a kid who never went to the principal's office, 6 is a whole lot. At this point, you're looking at very individualized types of plans for the students. Now, PBIS applies to students with and without disabilities, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a behavioral intervention plan for the student. When we're talking about students with disabilities, it often does include your behavioral intervention plan. And the behavioral intervention plan, that also applies if the students are in Section 504 too. So now you have another chance to ask questions, and you can revisit that front sheet on your notes packet to write down any new thoughts that you have or anything you've learned, and I'll also take any questions. Yes?
This is a question maybe for some people out in the districts on starting an FBA. Are people generally starting with a team meeting and then moving into an IEP portion? Are you considering that functional analysis is actually evaluation? Is your district asking for that sort of paperwork, and are you looking at that following that 60-day rule? Or I've got different districts I work with, and people are all over the board on this.
That might be a local question. Anybody have an answer?
Well, for us, we send both consent to do that. Yeah. And so then once that starts, then different ones of us have either interviewing the teachers and observations and kind of collect all the data. And then we have an IEP to present all that, and then decide if that goes into the behavior plan.
Anybody else have a different process? No? Everybody's ready for lunch? In my experience, we usually have an IEP meeting, and at that point we decide whether we need to do an FBA, and then from there we would move on to collecting the data and then reconvene again. So that's been my experience, but I know districts have very different processes. So I can't tell you for here.